Warhammer The Horus Heresy, Eidolon The Auric Hammer by Mark Collins. Act 2. Body. Chapter 7. Home and Hearth. Eidolon stared at the world for a long time, even as the crew quieted and his officers finally arrived. Around the edges of the chamber, purple-clad soldiery had gathered, forming a circle of waiting warriors that sprawled to the wings of the bridge. Where once they had worn their uniforms with pride and kept them immaculate, time had transformed them into parodies of their former grandeur. As their masters had become excessive, so they had followed. Their greatcoats were hung with gruesome trophies, artfully carved finger bones, large as scrimshawed plates of osseous matter, patterns smeared across fabric in human blood, and less identifiable fluids. They had become individual works of ruinous art, each one shaped by circumstance and whim. Once, they had been the Calathesian 97th, trusted, respected, and taken under the wing of the 3rd Legion. The Astartes had seen the potential in them and nurtured it, shaping and guiding the regiments. It had been an inevitability that they would follow the mighty exemplars of the Emperor's children down their path of madness and treachery. At the centre of their gathering, their commanding officer stood at attention, resolved not to falter under Eidolon's eye. Lord General Stanislas Otvar wore his desecration like a fine suit. The metal of his ornamental breastplate had run molten, setting into strange configurations that clung to his taut chest like organic plates. Like inlaid coral. He carried a gnarled helm under one arm, its visage shaped into that of a snarling beast, a carved tongue etched lasciviously across the faceplate. His free hand was locked onto the golden hilt of his sabre. "My lord," he made to say, but Eidolon ignored him. His sight still focused upon the world, holding his attention rapt. It seemed impossible. Eidolon had laughed at first, till all about him thought him mad. He had strode from one end of the bridge to the other, letting his gauntlets close around the gilt of a railing. Part of him yearned to yank it free, and cast it at the oculus, or to beat some hapless slave to death. He clenched his hand and pulled back, and let the breath hiss from him. His collar passed and settled, like sediment within the ocean of his severed soul.
"The gods are toying with me,"
he hissed.
"Face to face with this, of all things."
"It is just a world," Plegwa said with a shrug. "They break easy enough. Nothing to fear." Fear. 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 The word echoed oddly from the cacophony's mouth, reverberating around the bridge. Something whispered and cajoled behind the utterance, just out of sight, like an echo or a reflection.
"I do not fear it,"
Eidolon snapped. His own gift surged out, a booming recitation that filled the bridge space. Half-burned banners stirred suddenly in the wind of his fury. Braziers flickered and died. One of the mortal crew collapsed, blood running freely from their ears as they began to seize upon the decking.
"I do not fear it,"
Eidolon repeated.
"It is known to me. It is where I—"
Fingers raising his face to look upon his father's glory. The smile, that welcoming smile, free from judgment or scorn. "Rise, my son," he says. Gently and yet with such a furious intensity that all around them can hear it, like watching a son speak. "Rise, my Lord Commander."
"Where I became who I was,"
Eidolon finished. He had been a company commander then, one of the first and most capable. He had been leading his own detachment, a scouting force separate from both Fulgrim's attention and Lupercal's scrutiny. He had been bold and thought himself strong, simply to have the command that he did. Tetracala had been a world made mighty by its density, where other polities of the old night had sprawled outwards. Resembling their petty pretender empires, Tetracala had turned inwards. It had barely exploited the system in which it lay, focused instead on crafting a martial paradise in which to bask. It had been a fortress of high ideals, stout walls, and robust technology. Eidolon had tried his best to play diplomat, but it soon became clear that Tetracala's fighting men and council militant would never yield to the Imperium through honeyed words alone. He had been forced, and secretly thrilled, to take up arms against them. Alone in command, he had set about the process of assessing Tetracala's defences and fighting capability. before he took it apart, expertly, blow by blow. All of their strength at arms had ultimately meant nothing, a recurring epitaph for civilizations which met the Imperium in those glory days. Eidolon had conceived of the advance and led it to completion. Within days, the Council Militant had been cast down, its armies routed, and the capital taken with surprisingly minimal loss of life. He had found the balance between becoming ruin and liberation. At the final battle, the skies had cracked with the fire of a false dawn. The pride of the Emperor had attained orbit, and the Primarch himself graced them with his presence. It had been a ruse, Eidolon learned later. Fulgrim allowed him his operational freedom to test if he was ready. In the ashes of a culture, surrounded by those he made subjects, Eidolon knelt as a mere legionary and rose as a Lord Commander. And now the fates conspired, and he stood before it again. Under the reflected light of the beautiful world, even the intense lumens of the bridge seemed dull. The ship's surf gazed at it with their cattle eyes, blinking as though they could not comprehend its existence. The warp had gnawed their minds, winnowed their souls. Now the materium crashed down upon them with all its gravity.
What is your specs telling us?
Eidolon asked at last. The crew scrambled to answer him, fearful of his wrath as he stalked from the upper tiers down towards his throne. Eidolon's clawed hand traced along the back of the throne, dislodging flakes of ruined gold as he gouged into the metal and stone.
Speak, damn you.
Indistinct returns, Lord. One of the more minor Allspec technicians chirped. Certus, Eidolon thought his name was. The input cables flexed as he rotated to look up at Eidolon. Each new process signal sending floods of pleasure through what remained of his body. The man's eyes rolled. There are ships cresting from the other side of the planet. They move in response to our presence.
And how many ships are with us?
Vox transmissions are sporadic, Certus mewed, stirring again, as another wave of signals found his nerves. We have confirmation of the Sublime Blade, the Broken Monarch, his Beauty Manifest, the Dwell Eternal, and the troop transports Soul of Illumination, Trophonius, Refracted Sorrows, and Benighted Agony.
A fine assemblage of our strength.
Eidolon muttered. The force was enough for the task, but somehow their numbers rang hollow. Piecemeal, though he doubted there was any loyalist force in the sector cohesive enough to oppose them. Too close to Terra's major warp transits. Rogel Dawn would have pulled them all back behind his high walls and Sol's vaunted defences. A cry rose up. We have clarity. Certus strained against his bindings till his flesh and wire tore, smearing the machine components with blood. The new Mechanicum adepts chittered from the dark alcoves at the bridge's edges, pleased by the profane sanctity unfolding before their optics. Ships, Lord, signum codes. Reclaim them as vessels from the 16th Legion. I have... He paused, lost in ecstasy. Eidolon strode forward and seized Certus by the throat, squeezing. Veins pulsed in the man's neck, his pupils dilating as he struggled between the pleasurable inloads and the pressure on his windpipe.
Focused worm.
The steadfast spear, the Chthonian kiss, the solar birthright, and the battle barge War Master's mercy.
A strong showing in turn,
Eidolon said, nodding. He paced down towards the Oculus, picking out the ships as they moved into view. How typically brutish of the Sons of Horus they seemed. Their hulls scarred with kill markings etched into the metal, Titan scale, gaudy posturing and pretension, so that the War Masters favoured could proclaim their dominance proudly.
Yet, why do they idle? They could have torn this world from its moorings already. Had they the desire. Why wait and preen in the void? Barbarian arrogance, perhaps.
Eidolon thought with a sniff. He waved his hand in the air.
Bring me communion. Let me speak with the representative of our distant lord and master.
Chuckles rose from around the bridge, only to die as the hololith sparked life. The figure displayed was everything Eidolon had expected, and less. Armor stripped back for leanness in a Reaver's manner, save where mirror coins hung from thin chains, clattering against the plate with every movement, and making the audio skip. He wore his hair in a dark tangle of braids, looped with metal wire, his teeth were sharpened, and the lines of gang tattoos shimmered upon his skin. I didn't think to find some of Fulgrim's peacocks here. Yet the war does keep surprising us, doesn't it?
I could say the same.
Eidolon said. He raised a hand and picked at his gauntlets. affecting a wearied mane.
It's not often we see you so far from your master's skirts. True sons or false, the War Master likes to keep you close, whether it's his hand that guides you or Abaddon's.
Eidolon smiled.
Perhaps it is simply the will of the gods that we find ourselves here, orbiting an unsullied world with nothing but time running against us.
Gods, the Chthonian snorted. You sound like Lorgar's bastards. I've had enough of gods. Violence speaks plainly enough for my liking. Maybe I'll lead with that. The hololithic projection stuttered momentarily, and then began to speak again. We were following the War Master's main force disposition. The warp arterial. It paused again. Catastrophic immaterial collapse. So the adepts tell me.
Similar circumstances to us, then. How convenient.
Convenient, breathed the voice behind Eidolon's eyes. The ashen remonstrance of the king. Are there any coincidences left to us in this galaxy of fools?
Name yourself.
Eidolon went on, forcing himself to ignore the taunts.
I've spent time with the 16th, but you all blend together after a while. Such similar humors.
The warrior laughed and the hololith shook. I remember well when I had to serve as the example for the third. So few of you. You fought like a more numerous legion. I'll give you that. But you are still merely your namesake. Children.
We could debate ancient history until the war burns out, cousin. Or we could talk more pressing matters. You are here, we are here. Why? Before us lies a world. A fitting prize for any legion. Yet you have not seen fit to claim it. Instead, you sit, warp-lost and desperate.
Eidolon brought his hand down and tapped the row of consoles before him, before looking back up at the warrior.
I ask again, name yourself.
Gerog Shara, Praetor of the 23rd Company. We have only just found our bearings, Peacock. We barely found the world. Why would we have plans to attack it?
The 16th are always so keen to lead from the front, to attack first and question orders later. I would have thought you slavering already.
Be silent, or I will render you so. Gerog's image leant forward, scrutinizing Eidolon. I don't recognize you, and if I did ever know you, then I imagine you're too changed to match my memory. So I extend the same question to you. Who are you, little monster?
I'd expect nothing less from some brash Chthonian bastard.
Eidolon said and yawned.
You have the honor of addressing Eidolon, Lord Commander Primus of the 3rd Legion.
A pretty title. Did you invent it yourself? Eidolon let himself chuckle at that. The sound reverberated around the bridge, then made his subordinates wince. Transhumans had joined the debased mortals now. His chosen captains presented themselves as they became aware of the brewing confrontation, recognizing that a show of force was required. An insult to one was an insult to all. You were the one Tor Gaddon humbled, were you not? Gerog continued.
Murder was a long time ago.
Eidolon slurred. Despite himself, he was having fun with this one.
And I have been proven the superior warrior. After all, when Tor Gaddon's head came off, he did not get back up again. I did.
Another gift of your gods.
Among other things.
Eidolon said.
The galaxy changes by the day. Life and death are no longer as they once were. The Phoenician has shown us as much, just as I'm sure the War Master has shown you.
Eidolon's eyes had grown hooded, the dull orbs regarding the Praetor with glee.
I saw him at Ulanor, such a burden to take onto himself. Command always is, but that level of power, it would tear anyone else apart. I suppose that the constitution that a life lived amongst gang scum and failed miners conveys would be most useful, containing that much grandeur.
Watch your tongue, monster.
The War Master is glorious, transcendent, tediously godlike, and the blade that will end the great tyrant, and so on and so forth.
He sighed.
I am weary of having our lords and masters, already so vaunted and potent, grow so far beyond us, embracing the warp, becoming the godlings that they always played at. Don't you yearn for something that belongs to us before terror is claimed? Something final, something pure.
Gerog's image paused and tilted its head. He clicked his tongue thoughtfully. What did you have in mind?
This world.
Eidolon gestured.
Rich, verdant, practically unspoiled. I am not sure about you, but we will require time while our navigators decide on who will lead us onwards into the dark and towards terror. There is opportunity here.
Opportunity?
Tatragala was a proud world in defeat, and prouder still when given the chance to rise again as part of the Imperium. It will not have turned its cloak, if it is even aware of the wider war. The ruin storm has isolated it, perhaps since Calth. They may not know there are sides to be chosen,
Eidolon said.
Regardless, we can descend, take what we want, and bear the spoils back to Terra. This place had a potency. There will be material we may well need. Slaves aplenty. I'm surprised you haven't already tasted its promise.
He will betray you. The voice drifted through his awareness, with all the suddenness of nightmare. Eidolon looked around sharply. No one had spoken. Malachris stood and smirked. Vociferon watched on with his quiet detachment. Plegua burbled quietly, his life made of noise and pain. None of the mortals had dared to speak, only the shadow and the whispered hiss of the shattered king. Do you truly think it is coincidence that he is here? Eidolon would not show weakness, not here and now.
Bring your command cadre on board, and we shall speak of the war to come.
They hosted the Sons of Horus in the largest of the Sin's audience chambers. Faded murals swept across the ceiling, Palatine Aquilae soaring amidst the crackled thunderbolts and sweeping stars. Like all beautiful things upon the ship, the taint and tarnish had crept into it, ruining the wonder it had once evinced. Under the sullied ceiling, the officers of the Third Millennial gathered. Eidolon stood at the center of them, flanked by Malachris and Vociferon. Otvar and Plegua lurked behind them, while other soldiers of the Calathesians had taken up their places around the edges of the chamber. Girog blustered into the room, all ganger swagger and unearned confidence. 2 others came with him, sergeants, Eidolon assumed. Girog simply nodded to Eidolon. Dathron Vryn and Cartghost Sarek, 2 of my finest.
I'm sure,
Eidolon said.
Malachris and Vociferon, 2 of mine.
He stepped forward and waved a hand, triggering hidden hololithic projectors. A world blossomed before them, born of light, orbited by visualizations of the fleet and their current dispositions.
Tatragala,
Eidolon said.
An early conquest of the Third. Human basic, not too dissimilar from ourselves in terms of technological ability. Lesser, of course, but a very precise form of warfare. They employed a rather remarkable commitment to defense in depth.
He waved his hand and the hololith zoomed down to the continental level.
As can be seen here.
The representations of the cities burned with light, each cone dense with subsections, hidden readouts, and plunging foundations. The cities were vast, hive-scale, yet constructed with a martial eye that would have made Dawn or Perturabo envious.
Wonderful constructions, the great spiral cities of Tatragala. We would breach one sector, only to have the defenses close around us, and the enemy pour from their hidden sally ports. There is a beautiful logic to them, once you unravel their mechanisms.
Eidolon beamed with momentary pride, his twisted features contorting with exaggerated joy.
And we did unravel them. Not too much breaking, of course. The Mechanicum wanted to exploit so much of their old knowledge. Casualties and destruction were kept to a minimum. You would have been proud to see it, really. Elements of the dependable spear-tip assault, so beloved of your own Primarch. We struck simultaneously at the 3 greatest cities, cut our way to their predictably insular leadership caste, and took their heads. You intend to lead its reconquest? A wasteful undertaking. The age of idle crusade is at an end.
Eidolon sighed.
We will descend, take all we need to see us through to the throne world, slaves, material, and the like, and then leave them to the wretched ruin of their lives. When terror is ours, and we sweep back into the compliant galaxy, then there will be time enough to make our mark upon it proper.
He hesitated. He could feel the need to descend, to once again walk the surface of the world where he had become. More than a mere twang of nostalgia, it echoed in the chambers of his soul, resonating like the music of the cacophony. Garrog turned to whisper with his officers before his gaze swiveled back to Eidolon. The light of the hololith cast his features half in shadow, the crimson radiance rendering him ironically demonic. There was no god-touched glory in Garrog or his men. They seemed to cling to the desperate physicality that they believed yet underpinned the war. Fools. The hololith rippled and shifted. Refracted patterns of broken glass and white-hot fire flared momentarily in the furnace of the artificial light. A grin made of shadows and smoke, a passing flicker of a barbed tongue, moved across the projection, faded, broke apart, and was gone. Or are they more than they appear? Eidolon swallowed back his bile. If they survived to terror, they would know all the illumination of despair. They would see what the war had become, the depths and heights of their transformed fathers. These phantasms were nothing by comparison. Hollow taunts. Some men would break at the revelation, the warp's knowledge burning through them and leaving only bones and ashes. Perhaps the barbarian would endure a while, buoyed up by his belief in the War Master. Eidolon knew it for what it was. All stale promises and dead dreams. There was only whatever base pleasures could be wrung from the galaxy's corpse, bled from its occupants, sanctified in the holy obscenity that had become their lives. He had passed far beyond belief in his father, in the War Master, in the truths of their arguments or convictions. Now there was only the call, the pull that echoed in his soul, drawing him onwards, away from the morass of the past, and into the fire of the future. The first of Fabius's works, the culmination of the Laren campaign. I am all of these things and more, evolving. How can these blunt little creatures understand what we are all becoming? Then show us your plan, Lord Commander. Garrog growled. Let us see if it matches your bravado. Eidolon clapped his hands, and great sweeps of light arced across the image at his signal. There were 6 in total. Vast assault projections that at once encircled the enemy and drove in to overwhelm them. The tiered fortresses of the Tetracolons were surmounted and surrounded, harried by fast assault units even as they were buffeted by massed armor. A storm of sea green and ruined purple consumed them, burning them down to nothing.
Our primary target should be the Palace Militant,
Eidolon began to explain.
the seat of their government and whatever imperial command remains. The other cities will be less challenging, yet will bear sizable rewards in their own way. An even-handed state of affairs.
He stated proudly,
assuming you have the manpower to back it up, of course.
We do, Garrog snapped back. His warriors jostled forward to his side, hands upon their weapons. Eidolon stepped forth to meet them, weaponless, arms raised. Garrog was face to face with him now, his own hand still at his side, balled into fists.
You presume much here, Lord Commander.
A shadow moved behind Garrog, drawing Eidolon's eye. Motes of flame trailed through the air, like shed feathers, drifting just out of sight. The reflections in the gloss of the walls were not returning his gaze. We all serve our masters, the king whispered. Eidolon forced himself to ignore it, to respond as befitted his station.
As is my right, enforced by the fact that I could crush you like the gutter worm you are.
You could try, Garrog said with a nod, rolling his shoulders as he did. But I would hate to make you uglier than you already are, monster.
Promises will get you nowhere so long as they are idle.
Garrog glared in response, and Eidolon stepped back, letting his fingers drift into the hololith, intertwining his claws into the midst of the war to come.
Return to your ships, and make ready. When the skies of this world burn with the phoenix's wings, then you may commit your rabble.
It's really nice seeing the Emperor's children interact with another legion. I wasn't sure we'd see any other Space Marines, honestly. I mean, we are in the era of the Horus Heresy, where like there's obviously loads of Astartes around. But still, I thought that they were going to be really isolated. I genuinely didn't see it coming. It's nice to see, like, there's some rivalry and, like, my dad's better than your dad, back and forth. It's cute. I think it's cute. I like it. It's not quite what I thought it would be, honestly. I didn't think there would be any other ships, but maybe it's all part of some kind of weird play that the gods are making, the warp gods are making against each other. But I liked it. It's nice seeing how they interact. they're all like trying to like, they're like children. All of them. They're all trying to be like, to puff their chests out. And it's just a little bit silly. It feels a bit silly, at least. But yeah, I really like that. I'm very curious to see what actually happens. I feel like it's not going to be as, it's obviously not going to be as simple as what they said. Go, drop down, take what you want, and then fuck off. It's clearly not going to be that simple. I think the voice might be right. It's clear that the Sons of Horus look down on the Emperor's children. It's very clear that they do. They've made the Sons of Horus quite dislikable, I think. But then again, Eidolon is still a bit of a prick to them as well, so I mean... yeah? But I mean, I think it's part of his snooty character, really, isn't it? Anyway, I really can't wait to see what happens in the next chapter, so I'll try and have that out very soon. I hope that you're enjoying the series. If you are, please do leave a like, please do subscribe. I'm trying my best to get these out every day, or almost every day. And I hope that you're enjoying the book too. Please do let me know what you think. Let me know if there's a book you'd like to hear me read instead, or well, not instead, but after this is done. Well, anyway, I'll see you next time. Mwah.